Okay, so what makes us think that we can uh, take a country like Afghanistan and turn it into a modern democracy? Where do we, Iraq, Afghanistan, both? What puts us in position? What makes us stick around for 20 years? Now, and I say we in this context is mostly the United States, but it's not just the United States. We haven't been there alone. The British are still there. The British are actually doing a better job in all of this than we are. Just read that the British do have the forces on the ground, and the British are going out and bringing their citizens to the airport. Simple things. What a novel concept that they're going out in force to see to it that that happens. But this idea of nation building, and it's these are the concepts that I think we've been hearing that people give the most negative about these sorts of things, and I want to put into context where we do this. and and it's very often put in people lie about the context they put it in a lot. There's the context that it's very often put into is the context of imperialism. So imperialism is this concept of an empire. England is the great one of the world today. It's not us. It's not the United States. The United States, we came to empire building at the very end of empire building in the world. And so you have the United States, and we only have a couple of these protectorates, Puerto Rico, Guam. We have these places left that are quasi part of the United States, and they're in varying levels. You have Puerto Rico, which is very close to statehood sort of connection, and then you have a few of the others that are more distant. But they were of this idea that that was the way countries existed in the world. And it's interesting because it's thought of almost as though empire building and imperialism is the United States thing, and that's such a pathetic thing. It's how westernized countries, European westernized countries, had existed forever. But not just European westernized countries. Oh, by the way, Asia is full of empire building as well. If you go, the Chinese were dominant in empire building, and they had some of the early empires, along with they were taken over in other empires by the Mongols and so forth. And it was the natural state of the world. Okay, if we're gonna do this history thing, we're going to go way, way back. It's this natural state of human beings begin in individual groups of families, and you start to try to protect yourself. And how do you protect yourself? You do it by gathering together in groups of people to protect some space for you, and it's a cooperative way of defending yourself. And when people stop being nomadic and they first set down roots, that one of the first things that they do is think defensively. And so very early on you start having walled settlements. And so you go to the Middle East, and in archaeological digs you have these tells, which is a hill. And the reason the hill exists is because of successive defensive structures. So you have a town, and to keep people out of it, you build a wall around it, and that starts with just piling up some stones around it so that there's a spot that stops your enemy on the way in, and you can defensively hide behind it, and it stops your enemy coming in, and you get more and more elaborate with what those are. And it creates a hill because what happens is over thousands of years, when you exist in the same place for that long, you win battles, you lose battles. Every time you lose, though, you tend to do things like the town gets burned down and wrecked, and maybe the people all get killed, or the people get hauled away, and that falls into ruins. And then eventually if there was reason to live there once, there's reason to live there again. And so the thing that you do to build it is first you level it all again. And so you had this wall here, then maybe it's in disrepair, but you kind of take everything that's there and fill in the wall. And now you have a platform to build the next civilization on, and you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again. And it's amazing how all across the Middle East are places where civilization piled up 10 feet deep, 20 feet deep, 100 feet deep, hundreds of feet deep. If you go in Jerusalem, for instance, in around Jerusalem, there are excavations there that are hundreds of feet deep, and it's literally 2 foot, 3 foot stratified layers of civilization over thousands of years that got that deep. Okay? And mind you, until very, very recently, you were building mostly out of stone and mud and things like that. And so it's all there, and it piles up very neat, very nicely. By the way, when you're in an archaeological dig, it becomes this mound, and that's because it loses its structure on the outside after the last people leave forever. And so instead of it having a sharp edge, it erodes. And so what you have is a hill. And an archaeologist goes and they do what's called sharding a site. And you can go over and walk back and forth over a site with buckets and put in all the stuff you find. And what you have there is, in your bucket, you're going to have a record of all the time periods of the site, because it will have eroded through the side of all of that. So if you pick up everything and then you go date all of the pieces that you find, what you have is a collection of everything that's there. And sites all across the Middle East have been sharded, and then you have, you study early Bronze period, early Bronze 4, and you can look up and find all the early Bronze 4 sites, because somebody will have done that. Or if there are still sites that haven't been done and people walk around, you can go out, and you can't, but you have to put together an actual expedition. You go over and you'll pick a bunch of sites, and there's still ones. You go over and shard them all. Then you do the work, and you get all of these dated sites, and then people will go, oh, that's an interesting site. But they're starting with this knowledge of time periods that were there. And then you go and you kind of have to dig down to the layer that you want. Oh, by the way, you're supposed to do that in a very organized way that doesn't lose the info of all the layers above yours. Then you find your layer and figure out what's there. The reason all that happens is these basic drivers of humanity that we want to protect ourselves. And very often we protect ourselves by pushing back the borders. Well, how do we push back the borders? Well, we do it by starting to take defensive ground away from home. That as the ability to project power gets bigger in the world, as we enter what we think of as modern eras, okay, in the 15, 16, 1700s, we're entering into modern eras where we have ships and we can travel around the world and things like that, that we start going, hey, let's fight you over there rather than here. And so we go, okay, you're an enemy who wants to attack us, but you're going to attack there on the way here. So if we go and fight you there, then we establish some ground out there, and we make it so that we can keep you farther away from our ground. And World War II is a perfect example of it for the United States, that we had very little fighting that happened on in our home. We had a little bit. We had these couple of touches. There were people who died in the United States as a piece of it, but very, very little. It was projected out there. We get attacked. We get brought into World War II by Japan attacking us, but they didn't attack the United States. That's why that's not a battle that took place in the United States, because Hawaii wasn't part of the United States yet. Why were we there? Well, we put our fleet away from home. We'd put it halfway to someplace else. Okay? So it's out there. And as we've grown, we didn't do that. That's all part, it begins with this sense of, I'm going to protect here by projecting out there. The other thing you've done is it's been economic all along too. It's okay, how do we support home? Well, we do it by finding economic advantages out there. That Afghanistan is in a really rough place. A really rough place because Afghanistan is sitting in a place where they don't have much for natural resources. But everybody struggles with that. They struggle at it at different places in the scale. The United States is way up here in it. Britain's way up here in it because we've got a lot of resources at home. You still have to be looking ahead down the road. And so you're looking, let's take the modern era of oil. Okay, oil has primarily been sourced in the 20th and 21st century. Most of the oil's been sourced in the Middle East areas Russia, places like that. So a piece of it is we got to protect that resource out there. Mind you, we can get it here now too at very high levels. That's a whole nother discussion. But still, that idea that okay, we got to be able to protect that out there. Okay. If you go back, this nation building or this idea of empire was very strong up until the 1900s. That was the thing countries did, and it was not the United States that did it. It was everyone who did it. You were either a part of joining some other group, or you were being subsumed by, or you were creating them. And England and the United States become very much some of the final ones of those. Russia and the Soviet Union becomes a final one of those in a modern sense. Japan, China, they are modern ones. Okay, these are ones at the end. If you look at much of the rest of the socioeconomically powerful part of the world, it's because they were on the other half of that. If you look at Mexico and Brazil and places like that, they were of that. They were on the receiving end of it. They speak Spanish or Portuguese because they're part of bigger groups than that. Okay, they were on the receiving end. India, Pakistan, these were places on the receiving end. They were the protected of and were part of somebody's empire. Okay, that is how it worked. Everyone was doing that. Okay, because it was the known way of protecting yourself in the world, and it gave you economic going forward and so forth. So all of that is what was going on. So within that context, when you have conflict, you have to decide. There's usually wars. It's funny because we call Afghanistan a war when we would say Afghanistan's been a war for 20 years, but it really hasn't. In many ways, Afghanistan was a war for about this tiny, tiny slice of time, and then it's been trying to figure out, and we call it nation building after that. Okay, in this newest version of war where you have the idea of people who are it was guerrilla warfare in the early 1900s through into the mid 1900s, and you had soldiers who fought maybe in uniform and they hid on the sides, but they weren't part of the army. They were separate units. They might be part of the army, but they might be individual civilians who've taken up arms and so forth. But in the most modern version, that's terrorism. You have these groups that fight in very unorthodox ways, and so they leave a bomb beside the road and these sorts of things. And the world has found it very difficult to end a war, World War II, end of World War II sort of ending of a war, because because it's an unidentified enemy. It's an enemy who won't identify themselves, so you can't make them give up. Okay? It's very hard to get them to give up. This isn't new. Japan had a guy fighting World War II until I can't remember, the 1980s or something. And the guy'd gone into the bush and occasionally came out and killed somebody for years and years and years because he was going to do his piece, and he refused to surrender because his nation would never surrender. So any surrender, it's not possible because Japanese won't surrender. So anybody who suggested to him, they're calling out in the bush, out to the jungle, we've surrendered. He's like, no, that's not the case. I don't believe you. Okay, that's guerrilla warfare. That's this idea. In the most modern sense, it's hard to do because you can't round them all up. They don't surrender together. All the things that happened in World War II, Korea, you're getting at eras where we're fighting against people who won't fight that way. Okay, and Afghanistan is in the core of one of that areas of the world where the primary combatants will not play by the traditional rules. Okay, so who do you kill? Who do you kill enough of? Oh, by the way, their value for life is relatively low. I mean, in the sense is if you look at Middle Eastern based terrorism, they're very happy to blow up their own people. They blow them up like crazy. It happens all of the time. They will terrorize their own people. It's become the way of life there. And no, the world has not yet figured out a good way to to fight those wars to capitulation. With World War II, the end of World War II was going to end with Germany and Japan. It was, the leaders determined the only way to end this was going to be with 100% capitulation. They were going to give up in their entirety. There would be no stalemate. There would be no, you sort of, we're going to let you out with sort of keeping it. No, it was going to be unconditional surrender was the only choice. Why did they say that? Well, because these are places that had been at war forever. For as long as there's been human history, they'd been fighting somebody. It's been this constant being attacked, attack somebody, being attacked, attack somebody. Europe was like that. It was like that. Asia was like that. That's all that had been going on. For thousands and thousands of years, that's all that was going on. And we came into a time where World War I, World War II combined together to bring that, as basically as we've known it in the world. Korea was really the last of it. That stopped. It really stopped. And World War II, for the United States, for the Allied countries, it's this amazing thing where you had Germany and Japan. You had these two incredibly aggressive conquering groups go out, and in both cases the Allied forces beat them into utter submission and utter destruction. Okay, Germany's destroyed far more than Japan, and it's because the atomic bomb worked in Japan. We didn't have to destroy every city in Japan. Japan in World War II is a long ways from any place. So all the way up to the very end, it's a very, very difficult place for us to bomb like we could in Germany. Germany gets crushed. It's annihilated. It's because we had to fight our way to the core of it, and until Hitler kills himself, and you get all the way down to there. But in the process, you destroyed the country. Okay? Japan's been out there on the edge, and we've been destroying the Japanese forces and working our way island by island, getting there till we get out there and we start to bomb them. And we've been bombing them for a while, but then we have this ability to go in and go, okay, we're going to use nuclear weapons, and we drop one, and we wait, we drop another one on the basis that we're going to keep doing this until you quit. The second one is, the first one is the demonstration of the destructive power of a bomb. And the second one is the proof it was not a one-off. That because you go, why we dropped the second one? It was because Japan didn't capitulate. It's pretty widely believed they didn't capitulate because the gamble is they only had one of those. And we have to prove that we have more than one of those. And that we can continue to produce them. And then you get the surrender. But what happens then? That's... Notice the big change that happens after that. Up until then, this is 5, 10, 50. How long is World War II? Well, depends on who you are. Okay? It's 10 years long for some people. It's 5 years long for others. It's okay. And so you fight for this big long period of time, and then you have an end. And then by today's standards, we have this short rebuilding period. Okay? It's interesting because now we've flipped this over where we have a short war, 24 hours, 48 hours of massive bombing, weeks, months, but it's not years. You don't bomb a place for 20 years. You don't. Or 4 years or 3 years. You don't. It's all happens in a very short time, and you crush all of the visible things. Anything that looks like an army, you crush very, very quickly, and then after that you go, okay, now what are you going to do? What is this nation rebuilding thing? Well, understand that World War II, we were wildly successful in that. What do you mean by that? Okay, up until that time, these people had not been players in the world the way we think of today. Japan, all the things that you would read today about why were we trying to impose democracy on Afghanistan, these people don't value these things. What Western values, respecting women, these sorts of things, all these ideas, you can't possibly make that happen in Afghanistan. That's not Afghanistan. They're Muslims. They have these multiple, this is the way they look at the world. They're never going to buy into your system. Equality, it will never succeed there. You can certainly find all those things said about Japan. All of them. You go back to 1946, 47, when we're in Japan trying to help nation build Japan. You can find letters to the editor, and you can find opinion pieces in the major newspapers in America saying all those exact same things. It will never work. They will be back at war tomorrow. That's what they've always been at war. That's the only thing they know. That's the only thing. And here we are 75 years later. Well, how did that happen? It happened because of nation building. We went in and said, okay, we're going to not just leave. We're going to help them join the future. We're going to help them. And so my grandfather was in Japan, was part of the group of people sent to Japan to figure out what do you do with Japan. And my grandfather's background was in business, and so he was sent. We went through the factories and wrote down what's here, what skills do they have, what tooling do they have, and we actually decided for them. We actually went in and said, you're going to build cars now. Okay, you're going to build toasters. I don't have all of the facts in there, but we helped them find a plan that said, okay, what are these people going to do going forward? We've just wrecked the place. How do they pick up and carry on? Because if you let them fall into utter disrepair, if you let them fall apart, then we repeat. That's what we did in World War I. In World War I, we said, you get nothing. We took all the good shit and we left. And we said, oh, by the way, you don't get an army or anything like that. And if you look at Germany, if you look at the rise of Hitler, Hitler's rise comes out of that, of Germany, you're bad, and we hate you, and the world hates you, and you get nothing, and you're going to be poor, and you're going to like it. That is what opens the door for Hitler. And the rise of National Socialism, them saying, screw that, we're great, we're awesome, we're powerful, we're going to rebuild ourselves, and we're not going to follow those rules. Okay, so in World War II, we go, after World War II, we're smart enough to go, let's not do that again. Okay, so we got to do something to give them a future, and give them a future that makes it in their interest to join the rest of the world in a positive way. That is the motto we have that says when we go into Iraq and Afghanistan, that says you don't just kill the bad guys and leave. You got to give them some future, some idea, and it's within that context that we decide we're going to do that. And so in both places, we do think we build roads, we build power systems, we build communication system. My guys who were in Iraq said the best cell phone systems in the world are in Iraq. Everyone can get cell signal every place. Well, it's because they had no phones before. They weren't part of the modern world. We help bring the modern world there on the basis that then you can do something going forward. So why did we do this? Why did we stick around there for 20 years? We stuck around there for 20 years trying to find a way to give them a path into the modern world as we know it, as a positive participant on the world stage of some sort, in a way where the people have self-control and all of these sorts of things.